Oh, the Jello, the Jello. Thank you for the reminder. Oh my gosh. This is perfect because literally where I'm thinking of has Jello. So let's go take a look at VDC Design Room and I will show you the Jello idea. Oh, that's such a good idea. Thank you, Kragan. So we basically the other day designed a slime, like a classic dungeon crawler slime, which is why I wanted to show you this, but it's so cool. And I've been kind of curious to see how we could potentially animate it to make it feel like gelatin, right? It just got me thinking, so. Okay, this is the slime I wanted to show you. Meet slime, lake slime and alternate lake slime. Look at these things. I mean, pretty solid, right? Oh my gosh. I mean, as solid as a slime can get. Pretty cool though. I really like them. So let's dupe this guy and we're going to make an asset out of him. Call him Slimy, and click create. Okay. Got Slimy. And then I also wanted to grab one of the statues. We've got a couple statues over here. This one's my favorite though. So I'm going to basically grab this statue and create an asset out of it and call this statue and create. Cool. And then we're going to head back to that room where we can make some modifications. So let's go back here. Gelatinous cube for the win. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. It was pretty cool. We basically used a text object with some opacity and the lime green color. Yeah, I'll show you. I'll break it apart for you so you can see what it's made of. Okay. So going to assets, pull out the statue for later. So this one's for later. And then we've got the slime. And then we'll pull out another slime so we can break one apart. Use this one, break that one apart. Okay, there we go. So the first thing we're going to look at here is what is the makeup of this statue. So we're going to go and ungroup it and we're going to slowly take it apart. So you'll see there's this piece here, which is the top layer of the slime. We have this cube, which represents kind of like the internal gelatinous cube, so the solid part of it. And then we have additional layers on the sides, which make up the rest. And to make one of these little opacity objects, you take a text object, you type in mark equals pound, and then this is the color code. So there's 30 red, there's 100% green, 0 blue, and the alpha is set to 50. Now these are in hex code, so it's a little different. We've also set the font size to 1024 to get it to be as accurate as possible. And so to quickly recreate that, we head to our gizmos tab, pull out a text object, and then open up the properties panel. You then type in mark equals pound, and then it was 30 FF0050, which is a lime green color with opacity. And then we type the tab in, which gives us a cube. Now we change autofit to be off. We change the size to 1024. And we get this ridiculous thing, but that's actually not too bad. And so this gives us a really nice snappable cube. So we can now snap this really easily. And then we really want to just make it into a cube shape. So I think the easiest way is to just duplicate this cube for now, make sure it stays uniformly scaled. And then what we want to do is snap this to each of these sides. So we're going to snap scale there and there and there. And then I don't like that it's flickering, so trying really hard not to show it. So I guess maybe if I turn visibility off on this, that seems okay. Okay, so then we're gonna lock this in place, but we can use it to create duplicate and then array tool. So this button over here allows you to duplicate with the same rotation and position movement. And then we can select this one and duplicate and rotate. And that is pretty close to being perfect for our slime. And now in the inside of this, we want to unlock, open up the properties panel, and then attributes, scale this down just a little bit, down to like 3. Then we'll go and make it visible again. We get that shape. We can then select the 2, and like that, we've got our gelatinous cube. Pretty neat. So hopefully that shows you how to make one of these for yourself. Now what I'd like to show you how we can do is make it do one of those little classic slime movements. Am I right? Like, those are cool. So what we can do then is open up the properties panel, and assuming that this hasn't been scaled, we'll see the scale is 0.08. That's interesting. So I'm going to ungroup this, then reselect it all, and then group it. And now because I've just grouped it at this scale, it should say that its scale is 111. This isn't super important, but it does make it easier when we're scripting. And so now what we can do is go into our script, and we're going to create a sine wave scale. I think just like test this out. So we're going to call this slime. And when world is started, we need to create an event loop. So we'll send event no delay. This is fine. And we're not going to name this just yet. We're just going to do some experimentation here. And what we want to experiment with is taking the scale of 1 and scaling it between 0.5 and 1. So those are the values on the y-axis. So we're going to click scale to, and we're scaling self to a new vector from XYZ, where we know that the X and the Z are 1. So we'll grab a number input of 1 here and there and type in 1 and 1. And then we'll double check that this is on the y-axis. It's green, which means it is the y. And so the y needs to be a value between 0.5 and 1. And so I think the easiest way to do this is to create a new iterator variable. So we'll call this I. And then we'll set I to be a value that just continuously goes up by 0.01 perhaps, 0.01. So now I is going to slowly get bigger and bigger, and we don't want it to ever loop because we're just going to throw it into a sine wave. Let's just for now do this, and just so we can see what the values are, we can debug print the variable as a string, and then for now we're going to create a new number variable called y scale, and we know we want these values to be between 0.5 and 1, so we're going to debug print y scale, then grab the set to from the top, and then set y scale to be the sine of I, and we need to then attach this script to here to see what's happening. And now we're going to see what the values are under our script tab here. So if I click clear, you can see 0.9, 0.89, and it just keeps going 0.6, 0.4, 0.1. Then it goes all the way to -1. So we have values ranging from -1 to +1. And so knowing that we have values ranging from -1 to +1, we just need to make that change, right? So if we add 1 to this, we still want to debug print this, but what we're going to do is add an additional value after this. So we are going to add 1 to the current y scale that we just created, which makes it between 0 and 2. We know we want the value to be only going up and down by 0.5. So if we multiply it by 0.25, that will change the scale that it's shifting at. And then the last thing we want to do is add another 0.5 to it. So that way the value is between 0.5 and 1. And then we should be able to just drop that in here. And then I'm not going to debug print because I'm pretty confident in the math. And so now if we hit play, we should see the slime is squinching. It's crunching down. It is somewhat working. It's not fast enough, but it is on the right track. So, okay, with this going up and down, let's take it a step further because we know the position should always stay at the bottom. So right now the position is kind of going up and down. So what we need to do is save an origin position. Click vector, origin position, and then on world start we'll save this. So save origin position as position of object self. I think we just need to do the movement before we add 0.5. It's going to range between 0 and 0.5. And when it's at 0, we need to be down by 0.5. And so what we need to do is adjust the amount that we're adjusting by 0.5. So we take the origin position, and then we create a new vector from XYZ with a couple zeros in here, I think. Set that to 0 because we're not adjusting those values. We're only adjusting the Y value. And I've put this in the wrong spot, so just 1 second while I fix that. Okay, so we take origin position and we're subtracting the new vector from XYZ where the Y value that we're subtracting is the Y scale minus 0.5. And then I realized that instead of subtracting, I should actually be adding. And so I need to delete this and grab an add and then add this to the origin position since we've now made it negative because 2 negatives would have made it positive. So now, there we go. Oh yeah, look at that. There it is. Oh, that's almost good. It's not perfect, but it's almost good. Oh, it's on the right track. That's pretty cool. I'm not sure what to think yet. Oh, this is exciting. Okay, so let's change the speed up to 0.05, so 5 times faster. And then what I'm missing here is that it's not on something, so it's hard to tell if it's actually doing it correctly because it didn't seem like it was. And so you can also see that the text object has a little bit of extra right there. So that might be what we're seeing. So this is the actual bottom. So let's go and hit play. Yeah, so that's definitely not working. It's not working because it's not 1 meter. Yeah, okay, I got it. So it's not working because we're adjusting it by a meter, not by its actual scale. Like, this is the right amount to move down by, but we need to multiply it by the height. Okay, so grab multiplying this value by the y height of this. So if I grab this here, snap it right there, and then just measuring this object, we want to know what is the y value of this, which is 0.9. So it's not exactly. So I don't think this is exactly right. I'm just kind of like throwing it together real quick. Okay, so if we know this value is going to range between half and full, taking a negative, multiplying it by that, will then make it half of that. I feel like we're on the right track, but I don't think it's right still. And I'm not sure. Definitely feels like it's closer to being right, but it's still not right. My guess is this should be 0.45, and that is the reason. Okay, there it is. So it just needed to be half the height. There it is. Look at that. We just need to add some eyes to it, and we've got ourselves a bouncing slime or a really cool platform to stand on. Both are very, very cool. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so then our slime needs kind of like a little bit of random, right? Like, it feels too uniform. It's cool, but it's just too uniform. I'm trying to like add 2 waves to each other so we get kind of like a more interesting wave. What if we use a Perlin noise? What if we use Perlin noise and throw this in here? What are we debug printing now? Yeah, this value ranges from, I think this ranges from 0 to 1. I don't see it going below 0. So if we throw this in, we don't have to put I in both slots. That just causes it to walk diagonally. But what you'll remember over here is that we were adding 1 to it to move it up because it was between. So what we don't need to do that anymore because it's between 0 and 1, and we need to cut this down to 0.5 rather than 0.25, then drag this into here, delete this, and then hit play, and we should get, okay, that's a little too sporadic, so we're going to change the speed to 0.1. That's not bad. So now we've got kind of like a slime that's a lot more random because we're using Perlin noise rather than a sine wave. But I'd argue that it's not going high enough up. Like, these values are nice, but it's too low. And so when we're taking this Y scale, cutting it in half, then we add this value here, and then right here we're adding 0.5. Let's actually add 0.7, so it's just slightly larger and thicker. So it doesn't look like he's always so compressed. It's just kind of like maybe sometimes he's stretching taller. Nice. That's better. Now, there's only one other problem with this guy, which is that he always does the exact same pattern. Because we're using an iterator that starts at 0, the pattern, because of Perlin noise, is always the same. And so we're going to stop this. I'm also noticing that he's kind of blending into the floor a little bit. So there's a little bit of something different happening there. Probably because I'm adding 0.7, I'd think. Oh, we're subtracting, but it never does. It doesn't actually go that low. It only goes 0.25. That's why. So this should actually be minus 0.25. Okay. Hit play. Nice. Oh, right. So it doesn't start at a random value. So what we need to do is on world start, set iterator to be a random value. And we can do that by going to random number with decimals. And then we're going to drop in a number between 0 and like 1,000. Just be some random position. There we go. There's 0. And then now it'll always start with a different pattern. So we'd never know what this guy's going to do. It's always going to be a little bit different. Very cool. There you have it. That is some bouncy slime. Can you try and make the mass stay the same as it shifts on the X, Y, and Z? So right now, you'll see we send this event when the world has started. What we could do is say when trigger is entered by player, and then we need to connect to a trigger. So we'll say object my trigger. Click confirm. And then there's a button at the bottom here, which allows us to get events from the trigger. So we listen to events on the trigger. And then when the trigger is entered, we'll set it to a random value and send my event. We don't need to do that, but there. And then what we need to do is make sure my event stops happening after a certain period of time. And so we'll say instead of adding, we're subtracting. And so then this determines how long does it last as well. And so then we say if I is less than 10, Or how about 11? If I is less than 11, then continue looping. Okay, so that causes it to stop. And then all we need to do is grab a trigger, gizmos, trigger, and place that right there. Just really throwing it together real quick. And then drag this trigger to there. And now, when we hit play world, which is already playing, if I walk up and slap the top, there you go. And it shouldn't last too long. There it goes, so it stopped. And we could do that again. Yeah, it's a neat effect. It's definitely pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty interesting for sure. Hopefully that showed you what you needed. The next thing I wanted to talk about was who can see object. So imagine this slime is invisible until you see it, until the trigger is entered, right? So, and if you only want to do this on a per player, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but let's set object collidability on world start to false, and then set it to true when the trigger is entered, and then set who is allowed to view object can be done here and here. And then over here, we need to create a new player ID list, and this will be called who can see. And then we set who can see at world start here, and we set it here. And then we add values to this list. And so on list, you can see add to list. And so you really want to start by adding a server player. This makes it invisible because if there's nobody in the list, then everyone can see it. So we set server player, add them to the list. And then down here, when the player enters, we add that player to the list. And then we've updated the who can see list. And so theoretically, what should happen if I hit stop world and hit play is it's invisible to us until I hit the trigger. And then there's a slime there. Kind of cool.